Look, I'm not saying the Galactic Council was stupid. That would be rude, unprofessional, and completely accurate. But let me back up a second because this story starts the way all good disasters do, with bureaucracy and a human who really should have read the fine print. Her name was Rebecca Chen, though most people called her Bex, and she had the kind of smile that made you check if your wallet was still in your pocket. Not because she was a thief, mind you, but because that smile usually meant she was about to do something that would make lawyers weep into their overpriced coffee. Bex was a freight hauler, one of those independent contractors who moved cargo between the outer rim colonies and the more civilized inner systems. She flew a beat-up old ship called the Shooting Star, which was neither shooting nor particularly star-like, being more of a rusty brown color that suggested it had been assembled from spare parts and pure stubbornness. Which, to be fair, it had been. Now the Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, had recently passed Resolution 7-4-9-A, subsection 12, paragraph God knows what, which basically said that primitive kinetic weapons were now illegal on all registered trade routes. The reasoning, as explained by Council Representative Zixthor, a being that looked like a very judgmental jellyfish in a business suit, was that such weapons were barbaric, inefficient, and beneath the dignity of civilized spacefaring species. The resolution passed 17,000 votes to 1. The one dissenting vote came from the human representative, Ambassador Patricia Okonkwo, who had simply said into the record, "This is going to bite you in the ass," and then gone back to her crossword puzzle. No one listened. They never did. Bex heard about the new law the same way she heard about most laws, approximately 3 hours after she'd already broken it. She was docked at Station Kepler 442, a mid-sized trading hub that smelled like recycled air and broken dreams, when the station's security chief, a Vrexian named Court with too many eyes and not enough sense of humor, came banging on her airlock. "Chen," Court buzzed through his translator, which gave his voice the quality of an angry bee trapped in a tin can. "Station scanners detected contraband weapons on your vessel. You have 10 minutes to surrender them or face impoundment." Bex, who had been enjoying a cup of coffee that was exactly 50% coffee and 50% regret, blinked at the security feed. "Court, buddy, I don't know what your scanners are smoking, but I run a clean ship. Your cargo manifest lists 17 cases of firearms, 32 cases of ammunition, and one, quote, really nice compound bow." Bex set down her coffee. "Those aren't weapons, Court. That's freight. I'm hauling them to New Perth for a sporting goods distributor." Resolution 7-4-9-A clearly states that all primitive kinetic weapons are now illegal on registered trade routes. You have 9 minutes. And that, as they say, was that. Bex lost her cargo, her delivery fee, and very nearly her temper, which was considerably more dangerous than any of the weapons Court had confiscated. She stomped down to the nearest bar, a place called the Quantum Leap, that served drinks in cups that probably violated several health codes, and proceeded to learn everything she could about this ridiculous new law. Turned out, the Council had banned primitive weapons because the Draxian Empire, one of the more militant species on the Council, had complained that human colonists on the border worlds were dangerously armed with antiquated ballistic devices. Never mind that the Draxians had plasma rifles that could vaporize a person from 300 meters. Never mind that the humans in question were mostly farmers protecting their livestock from local predators. The Draxians had filed a formal complaint, and the Council, in their infinite wisdom, had decided the best solution was to ban the weapons rather than address the actual problem. Politics. It's the same everywhere, apparently, even in space. Bex downed her third drink, which tasted like regret mixed with antifreeze, and was seriously considering a fourth when her comm unit pinged. It was a job offer, a weird one. The message was from someone calling themselves the Free Traders Coalition, a loose association of independent haulers who were getting real tired of the Council's ever-expanding list of regulations. They wanted Bex to run a shipment from Earth to Proxima Station. The cargo, sporting equipment, the pay, triple her usual rate. The catch, the route passed through council checkpoints, and the cargo was exactly the kind of thing that would get her ship impounded faster than you could say bureaucratic overreach. Bex read the message twice, deleted it, then restored it from her trash folder because she was not, by nature, a sensible person. 3 days later, she was on Earth, standing in a warehouse in Montana that smelled like gun oil and freedom, talking to a man named Jack who had the kind of beard that suggested he'd never met a razor he liked. "So," Jack said, leaning against a crate that definitely did not contain illegal weapons, but absolutely did contain illegal weapons, "you understand the risk here?" Bex nodded. "Council catches me with this cargo. I'm looking at impoundment, fines, and probably a few years in a detention facility that serves food even worse than station rations." "And you're still in?" "Jack, my friend, I once hauled a cargo of live Glorbian singing eels through a solar flare because the customer was willing to pay extra. This is Tuesday for me." Jack grinned. "I like you. You're crazy, but I like you." The cargo, as it turned out, was not actually sporting equipment in the traditional sense. It was compound bows. Lots of them, 300 units to be precise, along with enough arrows to start a small war, or a very elaborate Renaissance fair. There were also crossbows, longbows, and what Jack called traditional recurve bows for the purists. "See," Jack explained, "when the council banned primitive kinetic weapons, they were thinking guns, pistols, rifles, that kind of thing. They even specified in the resolution devices that use chemical propellants to accelerate projectiles. Bows don't use chemical propellants, they use mechanical energy. Technically, they're not covered by the ban." Bex raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me that bows are legal on a technicality?" "I'm telling you that bows aren't mentioned in the resolution at all, which means until the council updates their rules, bows are perfectly legal." "That's the kind of logic that gets people in trouble." "That's the kind of logic that makes people rich," Jack corrected. "The colonies are desperate for defensive weapons. They've got predators, raiders, and the occasional Draxian war party that conveniently forgets where the borders are. They can't get guns anymore, but they can get these. And you're going to deliver them." Bex should have walked away. She really should have, but triple pay was triple pay, and her ship needed new reactor coils, and there was a certain satisfaction in finding loopholes in stupid laws. She loaded the cargo and launched 3 hours later. The trip to Proxima Station should have been smooth. Jump through the gate at Mars, cruise through the neutral zone, arrive at Proxima, collect payment, go home. Easy. Except the universe has a funny way of making things complicated, usually right when you start feeling confident. Bex was 2 days into the journey, halfway through a very boring audiobook about accountancy in zero-G environments, when her sensors started screaming about an incoming ship. A big one. A council enforcement cruiser, specifically, the kind that had enough firepower to turn the shooting star into a rapidly expanding cloud of debris. "Unidentified vessel, this is Council Enforcement Ship Righteous Fury. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded for routine inspection." Bex looked at her cargo hold, then at her sensor display, then at the half-eaten sandwich on her console, and sighed. Of course this happens. She could run. The shooting star was old, but she was fast, and Bex knew tricks that most pilots had forgotten. But running from a council cruiser was a great way to turn a routine inspection into a high-speed chase, and those rarely ended well for the person being chased. She could fight. The shooting star had defensive weapons, mostly point defense lasers meant for clearing debris and discouraging pirates, but fighting a council cruiser was like bringing a stern look to a tank battle. Or she could comply and hope that whoever was doing the inspection hadn't actually read the resolution carefully. Bex cut her engines. The boarding party consisted of 4 council enforcers led by, and I am not making this up, the same judgmental jellyfish who had sponsored the weapons ban in the first place. Representative Zixthor floated into her cargo bay with the kind of smug satisfaction that suggested he'd been waiting his entire career for this moment. Captain Chen, Zixthor burbled, his translator giving his voice an even more annoying quality than usual. We received a tip that you were transporting contraband weapons in direct violation of Resolution 7-4-9-A. I do hope you're prepared to explain yourself. Bex crossed her arms. Representative, always a displeasure. What exactly do you think I'm hauling? Zixthor gestured with one of his tentacles, and his enforcers opened the first crate. They pulled out a compound bow, the kind with all the pulleys and cables that made it look like something from a sci-fi movie, which was ironic, given the circumstances. This, Zixthor announced triumphantly, is a primitive kinetic weapon. That, Bex countered, is a sporting bow. It fires projectiles using mechanical force. That makes it a weapon. It fires arrows using stored elastic energy. That makes it sporting equipment. Zixthor's entire body quivered, which Bex had learned was the jellyfish equivalent of an eye twitch. Captain Chen, do not play semantic games with me. The resolution clearly bans primitive kinetic weapons. Bex pulled out her datapad and brought up the actual text of the resolution. The resolution, and I quote, bans devices that use chemical propellants to accelerate projectiles for the purpose of causing harm. Bows don't use chemical propellants. They use mechanical energy. Different mechanism, different classification. That is absurd. That's what I said when you banned legitimate cargo haulers from carrying sporting goods, but here we are. One of the enforcers, a Korthan who looked like he was regretting his career choices, leaned over to Zixthor and whispered something. The representative's color shifted from a confident purple to an annoyed mauve. The law, Zixthor said slowly, was clearly intended to ban all primitive weapons. Intent and implementation are two different things, Bex said cheerfully. You want to ban bows, Representative. You're welcome to draft a new resolution. Until then, my cargo is legal. For a long moment, Zixthor just floated there, quivering with bureaucratic rage. Then he gestured sharply to his enforcers. Confiscate everything. We will let the courts decide if this cargo is legal. And that's when Bex made her mistake, or her greatest triumph. History's still debating that one. She picked up one of the bows from the opened crate, a beautiful recurve model made from laminated wood and fiberglass, and knocked an arrow from her personal supply. She didn't point it at anyone. She just held it, drawn and ready, aimed at the ceiling. Representative, she said quietly, you're not confiscating anything. Every enforcer in the bay immediately drew their plasma. Pistols. Bex did not move. She just stood there, bow drawn, arrow ready, looking absolutely calm despite having enough firepower pointed at her to reduce her to constituent atoms. Captain Chen, Zixthor said, his voice gone very flat, you are threatening council enforcers with a weapon. That is several kinds of illegal. I'm holding a bow, Bex corrected. A piece of sporting equipment, not a weapon, according to your own resolution. And I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply exercising my right to hold my own property. You have that bow drawn. I'm testing the pull weight. Got to make sure the merchandise is quality before delivery. The standoff lasted about 10 seconds, which felt like 10 years. Then Zixthor made another gesture, and his enforcers lowered their weapons. Not because they were scared of Bex, but because every single one of them had realized the same thing. If they shot her, they'd be killing someone for holding sporting equipment. The optics on that would be catastrophic. This is not over, Zixthor hissed. Looking forward to the rematch, Bex said, slowly lowering the bow. The enforcers left. The righteous fury disengaged and jumped away. And Bex sat down on a cargo crate and had what she would later describe as a moment of profound reflection on her life choices, which mostly involved shaking and wondering what the hell she'd just done. She delivered the cargo to Proxima Station without further incident. The colonists, a mix of human settlers and sympathetic aliens who were tired of council overreach, paid her triple rate plus a bonus for being awesome. One of them, a woman named Maria who ran the local defense militia, looked at the bows and grinned. These are perfect, Maria said. Quiet, effective, and completely legal. The Draxians have been pushing into our territory, and the Council won't do anything about it. Now we can actually defend ourselves. Just don't tell them I sent you, Bex said. Wouldn't dream of it. Bex returned to Earth, collected her payment from the Free Traders Coalition, and figured that was the end of it. She'd exploited a loophole, delivered her cargo, and made enough money to fix her ship and have some left over for a vacation. Maybe somewhere warm, somewhere without jellyfish bureaucrats. But news travels fast in space, especially news as juicy as human cargo hauler defeats council inspection by pointing out their own stupid law. Within a week, Bex's stunt had gone viral, not just on human networks, but across the entire council. Species who'd never heard of bows were suddenly fascinated by them. Independent traders started hauling bow shipments. Colonies started requesting them. And the Draxians, who'd started the whole mess by complaining about armed humans in the first place, were now facing colonists with weapons they legally couldn't do anything about. The council, predictably, lost their collective minds. Emergency sessions were called. Amendments were drafted. Representative Zixthor went on every news network that would have him, ranting about dangerous loopholes and human arrogance. But every time they tried to expand the weapons ban to include bows, human lawyers would point out 12 different reasons why that would be legally problematic, historically insensitive, or just plain stupid. See, bows weren't just weapons, they were cultural artifacts. The Mongolians had used them to build an empire. The English longbow had decided battles. Japanese kyudo was a spiritual practice. You couldn't ban bows without effectively telling dozens of human cultures that their heritage was illegal. And the council, for all their faults, were smart enough to know that was a fight they couldn't win. So they did what bureaucracies do best. They formed a committee to study the issue. That committee is still meeting, by the way. 3 years later, they've produced 17 interim reports, held 48 public hearings, and spent approximately 9 million credits on consultants. They have not actually changed anything. Meanwhile, bows have become the weapon of choice for outer rim colonies. Crossbows, compound bows, longbows, recurves, even weird experimental designs that humans keep inventing because humans cannot stop inventing things. There are training programs now, competitions. An entire subculture has sprung up around archery in space. The Draxians filed 3 more formal complaints. The council ignored all of them. And Bex? She became something of a legend in independent trader circles. They call her the Loophole Queen, which she finds both flattering and slightly embarrassing. She still hauls cargo, still flies the shooting star, still drinks terrible coffee and makes questionable life choices. But she also keeps a bow in her cabin now. A beautiful recurve model, custom made, with her name engraved on the riser. She doesn't use it much, doesn't need to. But it's there, a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight a stupid rule is to follow it so precisely that it breaks. 6 months after the incident with Zixthor, Bex was back on station Kepler 442, the same place where this whole mess started. She was having a drink at the Quantum Leap, minding her own business, when someone sat down next to her. It was Ambassador Okonkwo, the human representative who'd voted against the weapons ban. "Captain Chen," Okonkwo said, ordering something that looked radioactive and probably was. "I've been wanting to meet you." "Ambassador, I'd say it's an honor, but I try not to lie before my 3rd drink." Okonkwo laughed. "I like you. You caused quite the stir, you know." "Wasn't trying to, just wanted to deliver my cargo." "And in doing so, you exposed a fundamental flaw in council lawmaking. They write regulations without thinking about implementation. They ban things without understanding cultural context. They react to complaints from powerful members without considering the consequences." Okonkwo took a sip of her drink and grimaced. "Good Lord, that's terrible. Anyway, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For reminding the council that humans don't roll over when faced with stupid rules. We find the loopholes. We exploit them. We make the bureaucrats regret their choices. It's one of our best qualities." Bex considered this. You think making jellyfish angry is a good quality? I think standing up for what's right, even when it's inconvenient, is a good quality. The Outer Rim colonists can defend themselves now because of you. The Council is learning that they can't just push humans around, and Representative Zixthor has developed what I'm told is a very pronounced stress twitch. Okonkwo grinned. So yes, Captain Chen, I'd say you've done well. They drank in companionable silence for a moment. Question, Bex said eventually. When you voted against the ban, you knew this would happen, didn't you? I knew humans would find a way around it. I didn't know it would be bows specifically, but I knew we'd find something. We always do. Why didn't you warn them? I did. I said it would bite them in the ass. They didn't listen. Okonkwo finished her drink and stood. Keep doing what you're doing, Captain. The galaxy needs more people like you. People who read the fine print and refuse to accept stupid rules just because someone in authority says so. People like me usually end up in jail. Or they end up changing the galaxy. Sometimes both. The ambassador nodded and walked away, leaving Bex with her thoughts and a bar tab she definitely couldn't afford. The story could end there. Probably should end there. But there's an epilogue that's too good not to share. 2 years after the Bao incident, Representative Zixthor retired from the council. The official reason was to pursue other opportunities. The unofficial reason, according to sources who absolutely cannot be named, was that he'd developed a nervous condition triggered by the sight of wooden objects with strings. His replacement was a young Vrexian named Kix, who had radical ideas like, maybe we should think about laws before we pass them, and perhaps we should consider cultural context. Kix lasted 3 months before the council's old guard drove them out, but it was a nice 3 months. The weapons ban was never officially repealed, but it was amended so many times that the current version reads like it was written by a dozen different people who'd never met and had fundamentally different ideas about what words meant. Guns are still illegal on most routes. Bows are fine. Energy weapons are banned except when they're not. Projectile weapons are prohibited unless they're classified as sporting equipment, which is determined by a formula so complex that it requires 3 expert witnesses and a mathematician to interpret. In other words, the council learned absolutely nothing, but humans learned something. They learned that no matter how big the bureaucracy, no matter how many rules and regulations and resolutions, there's always a loophole, always a way to do what needs doing. Always a path forward for people stubborn enough to find it. The Outer Rim colonies are thriving now. They've got defenses, trade routes, and a booming archery tourism industry that's somehow become a thing. The Draxians still complain, but nobody listens anymore. And somewhere in the Kepler sector, a beat-up old ship called the Shooting Star is hauling cargo, breaking rules on technicalities, and proving every single day that humans are really, really good at finding creative solutions to stupid problems. As for Bex, she's doing fine. She paid off her ship, took that vacation, came back tanned and broke, and immediately took another sketchy hauling job because she is fundamentally incapable of making sensible life choices. The Free Traders Coalition offered her a leadership position. She turned it down. Ambassador Okonkwo tried to recruit her for some kind of diplomatic liaison role. She turned that down too. A major news network wanted to do a documentary about her. She told them where they could stick their cameras. Because at the end of the day, Bex isn't a revolutionary or a hero or a symbol of human defiance. She's just a cargo hauler who wanted to do her job and got tired of people telling her she couldn't. The fact that her stubbornness accidentally changed galactic politics is just a happy coincidence. Well, happy for everyone except Representative Zixthor, who is reportedly still in therapy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and assorted alien species, is the story of how one human with a cargo full of bows exposed the fundamental absurdity of bureaucratic overreach, proved that primitive doesn't mean ineffective, and reminded the galaxy that humans are dangerous not because of our weapons, but because of our absolute refusal to accept stupid rules without finding 18 different ways around them. The council banned primitive weapons. Bex loaded a bow and asked if it was primitive enough for them. Turns out it was primitive enough to be legal, effective enough to matter, and annoying enough to make jellyfish bureaucrats develop stress disorders. And honestly, that's the most human solution to a problem I've ever heard. Primitive enough for you? Yeah, I thought so.